And the reality is, my opinion is, the companies that do not do this are going to die. Okay, this is my thesis. The people who get this right are going to be the entrepreneurs and business owners who create truly AI native service companies. The first concept that you have to understand is, what is AI native? In my opinion, AI native means that the context required to deliver the value proposition to your customer, all of the context required to expertly deliver that value, is available and able to be dynamically sourced or largely dynamically sourced and delivered to your agentic infrastructure. Okay, what does that mean? As a short-term rental management company, in order for me to deliver value to my clients, I have to handle different aspects of their business. I'm going to give you an example. We have to handle guest messaging for different homeowners, where every single house is different. Every single owner is different. What they want out of the business is different. Okay. What they want out of us is different. And every house having its nuance is important. Our company and having our standard operating procedures is important. The context of the past guest's conversation is important. The context in real time of the owner's text messages to our team is important. Imagine that we get a message from a guest, and then 2 seconds later we get a message from the homeowner that says, please do not respond to that guest, right? That's a pretty nuanced example, but that context of the owner text messaging us is on an SMS thread. The context of the guest messaging us is probably on Airbnb or Vrbo or these other platforms. Okay. So bridging that contextual gap in real time is a problem that has to be solved if you're trying to replicate and remove humans from the equation. Right? That seems almost obvious, but it's difficult because bringing all those layers of context together means that you have to have a very sophisticated primary key system. Okay, what is a primary key system? A primary key system means that you have to be able to tie the entities that interact with you, whether it's a guest, a homeowner, etc., back to, let's say, numbers in a system, right? And so as an example, we're talking about the homeowner who texts us, we're talking about the guest, and we're talking about a property. When the AI who interacts and drafts the message for that guest, right, they need to pull the context that's necessary for them. Well, how do they do that? Well, the AI has to have the number or the primary key of the property. And so when the AI who's answering the guest message pulls the data, the context that it needs to be aware of, it says, okay, well, I'm linked to this property. This property has all this contextual information, including what the owners are. Okay, these links to the owner points to these SMS threads in a different database. Okay, I can now access this owner communications in real time, okay, as well as the guest communications over here. But bringing that context together is called context engineering. And so if you are not careful, when you bolt on AI, you're not going to create environments that function truly like the human mind. The person who's doing guest messaging, it's not like they have one screen and they're answering the guest messages and they can't see anything else. They probably have the homeowner's messages up. They probably also have the property's information up. They have maybe other tabs up, but humans are taking in multiple streams of stimulus at once and combining that effectively to hopefully make a good decision. You have to do that with AI as well. Okay. The companies that do not do this are going to die because the cost efficiency and the contribution margin that's available when you are operating effectively is going to create price pressure or quality pressure on the incumbents that are slow to adopt. Okay, what do I mean by that? The very large companies that are slow moving, or even the medium-sized businesses, or the slow businesses that are just oblivious, or small businesses that are oblivious, all these businesses do not leverage this technology are going to have competitors, hopefully like me, right? Or you, if you're watching this video, who understand how to compile the context necessary to be really good in a given industry and start creating systems and processes around this context and agentic infrastructure. And these competitors are going to say, or these other companies are going to be like, well, we can either increase the quality bar while keeping the price exactly the same, or we can slash prices and keep the quality the same as our competitors and create a cost arbitrage that the other competitors can't keep up with. Okay. And as an example, my industry, most short-term rental managers charge 15 to 25% of gross revenue. So what are we doing? My entire goal is to bring that fee down to 8%. Why 8%? Well, that's what long-term rental managers charge. And I believe that I can run the business, at that margin and have a healthy contribution margin on our side. Or at that fee and have a healthy contribution margin on our side. So when we accomplish that, that's going to allow our customers to convert from a 15 to 25% management fee down to an 8% management fee. That is a large amount of savings per year at the same quality that they were receiving before. And that's going to happen in a lot of industries. So I think a lot of industries that were hard to consolidate and hard to scale are going to be much easier moving into the future. And I also think that's why YC, right, in their summer 2026 RFS, request for startups, their number 2 in the entire list of 10 was AI native service companies providing the service itself. Because if you can create the right infrastructure to scale a service company, then you have an amazing cost arbitrage opportunity. And so when you're trying to set up your agentic infrastructure, let's say you're starting a company from scratch, what you want to do is you want to go on a whiteboard and you want to line out what are all the different ways that you deliver value to the customer. Let me give you an example with short-term rental management. Okay. We answer guest messages. Okay. We provide maintenance support and coordination to the homeowner, right? And for the property. We provide cleaning coordination and quality control to the cleanings. Okay. All of these different accounting, right? All of these different elements of value require different pieces of context to be effective. For example, in order to do maintenance and coordination of the property well, we need to understand certain context about the homeowner. What is their minimum and maximum maintenance threshold until they need to be looped in for approval? You then want to identify what are these skills? What is the industry knowledge? And then how does that industry knowledge get affected by the nuance of the actual situation? Okay, here's an example. We have a guest who's asking for a full refund. Okay, they're asking for a full refund because, let's say, they came into the house and all the beds were unmade, and there was trash in the trash cans, and the house was not cleaned properly. Okay, well, you might have a company policy for that. Right? A certain refund percentage, or yes, give a full refund. They shouldn't be checking into a dirty unit. But what if, contextually, 2 hours before that guest checked in, they were trying to cancel, right? And you knew they were trying to cancel because Airbnb support reached out to you and said, hey, they're asking for a special exception because, they're sick or something like that. And then what about if 2 hours before that, the cleaner submitted a report and the entire report shows that the house was well made and the beds were made and all the trash was taken out. And these are your best cleaners. These different elements of context change how your company will interact with that guest and will change the standard operating procedure. nuance. We're talking about nuance, which is the heart of good decision making in a business. Because if the decision making was extremely easy and there was just a table and you could follow the table and make excellent business decisions, then being a business owner wouldn't be that difficult. You just give the table to the employee and say, follow this table, you're fired. But the problem is good judgment costs money, right? If you want good judgment, you need to pay enough to hire talented people. Some businesses, it's going to be impossible to get that context. Okay. And actually, this thought process is why I chose short-term rental management as opposed to, trying to create AI for hotels. Because with a hotel, it's very difficult to gather this context. So once you've identified those different elements, then what you have to do is meticulously craft the layers of context and how you're going to grab them. Okay, so for my business, what is that? That's phone calls. That's text messages. That's emails. That's guest messages. That's cleaning reports where we transcribe the report, okay, the before and after videos, and they're required to take like different photos of the house, including inventory. And we do a visual supply system, a lot like Lean Six and Six Sigma and stuff like that. And we get context from those reports. Okay. So we started to identify my business. Okay. How can we get more context out of every single interaction? So as an example, all of our phone calls are automatically transcribed. My team members, can press a button to turn that off if somebody doesn't agree to being recorded. But every single phone call is automatically transcribed and recorded and stored in a database. Who were they talking to? When were they talking to them, etc. Same thing with our SMS messages. So I can see every single employee's SMS messages that are sent from my phone. Okay. And you have to find the ways to grab the context, right? That's why we created our own cleaning software. And we built that in-house so that we could do AI video extraction to get the data that we needed per turn in order to determine whether or not the cleaner is doing the right job, whether or not there's damages at the house. Okay. Once you've identified all the different sources of context, you want to tie that back to the other principle that we talked about, which is the primary key system. And so whenever context comes into the system, you need to tie it back to the people that it's linked to or the in this case, property that it's linked to. For example, every single guest message that comes into our system is linked to a unique identifier that identifies that guest and only that guest. Okay. And it's also linked to a property and only that property. So this property has a specific number assigned to it. Okay. And it's linked to that reservation. That reservation is a unique identifier, and it's linked to that homeowner, etc. So every single guest message is linked to multiple digital twins. And I'm going to get to the digital twin concept in just a moment. Okay. That reservation is linked to the guest, the property, and maybe the payments, right? That are associated with that specific reservation. So you have this spider web of interlinking context, right? Where you can traverse those links or edges to say, give me all the context available for this property. And you get the list of all the guests and all their payments, right? And all their messages. Or give me everything you know about this reservation. Okay. It's attached to this guest, all these messages. You start tying the data, any data that comes into your system, a email, a phone call, SMS, a Google Meet, to what are all the employees that were at that Google Meet and their unique identifiers. So here's the transcript, and the transcript is now linked to this employee, this employee, this employee, this employee, this employee. You get it. Okay. And so that creates the ability for you to create your company's digital twin infrastructure so that when you say, give me everything you know about this employee, what you're getting is here's every single meeting that they were in. And because Google Meet automatically transcribes and stamps the name of the person and everything that they said, right? to every single phone call that they made, to every single SMS message that they sent and who they sent it to. And you create a digital twin for everything that that employee knows. When an employee leaves a company, the cost to that company is not only the cost of rehiring and training somebody else, but it's the cost of the context that will never get recaptured. It's that customer having a conversation with that specific employee and be like, hey, from now on, can you guys do X for me? It's really important for me, for you guys to do this whenever you guys send me an email. Okay. Well, that employee probably never wrote that down, but they remember it because they were a pretty good employee. Maybe they left because, they found a better opportunity elsewhere, or they were moving and they weren't even getting fired. But all that important context leaves with that employee. So the context isn't just about delivering the value proposition. It's about creating a stable organization that can learn over time. Once you have the digital twin infrastructure, you're probably at like 50%, maybe 60% of the end goal. Once you have the digital twin infrastructure, then you have to start thinking, how do I provide the capability for the AI who's either automating or presenting the solution to the human for approval? How do I provide and source this context dynamically so that the AI has the right information to make the right decision? Anybody utilizing AI knows that garbage in equals garbage out. And so it's not just about providing the right context. It's also about not providing distracting context. If I present information as fact about a property to an AI that is really a regurgitation from a past guess that was never validated, then that could be dangerous, right? Garbage in equals garbage out. And so providing and creating the context-aware systems is half the battle. So how do you do that? Okay. The way to do that is to start small in the beginning and do not try to get fancy with the dynamic context. The only context I really need to know to answer a guest message is the following. I need to know everything about the property, its FAQ, right? Its rules, its house policies, etc. I don't really need to know what the maintenance guy who came to fix the dryer said, 5 months ago. Obviously, there's a certain amount of context needed to answer 95% of messages. If you get too wrapped in to that other 5%, you are going to move way too slowly to be successful. And it goes into the second concept, which is when you're sourcing the context for your systems, aim for the 80 to 95%. How do I handle 85 to 95%? And then how do I give this information to the AI and then have the AI present the solution to a user? The goal in the beginning of creating an AI native service company, in my opinion, is to not remove the user. Don't try to remove the user in the beginning. Try to scale their judgment. Keep the exact same employee in that role and allow them to fulfill 4 to 6x the amount of work that they were able to do before. And you do that by saying, here, you used to have to click into 6 different pages of context in order to know enough to answer this, a guest message about a property that you've never set foot on. Okay. Let's provide all that context for you, summarized with footnotes and quotes here. And then the AI's answer and their reasoning and a risk score and accept, modify or reject button. And the trick here is as you develop these systems and the AI presents the user the reasoning, you log what the AI suggested, what its available context was, its reasoning, its confidence score, its risk ratio that it gave the output, and then you log what the user actually said. And if those two things are vastly different, she'll pop up to the user. Hey, these two things do not line up. Provide a brief explanation. So they say, hey, the AI didn't realize that the homeowner messaged us. Okay. We look into that and we realize, oh, the homeowner wasn't properly linked. They're a new customer and their phone number was changed, whatever. You start looking into what parts of your infrastructure are not equipped to provide the best possible results. Okay. So capture the context required to make the 80 to 95% solution, present the user the solution and the reasoning, capture that and compare that to the user's actual output. Okay. The next step is to start thinking about how to scale that user or that value chain in a way where the employee who comes into work, they log in and what they see is a queue of decisions that they need to make, right? Just like a messaging queue for a guest messaging team, but for any job. This is the next ticket I'm handling. Okay, this is the next decision I need to make. And this is what the AI is suggesting in this scenario. And this is the context necessary in order to make that decision. And then you log those two together. Okay. In order to get to that queue system, you have to create, in my opinion, what is the hardest step of the AI native infrastructure process, which is an operating workflow engine. Okay. An operating workflow engine. What the heck does that mean? It means that you've distilled down your value delivery into a series of processes. Okay. Workflows. And if you're familiar with NAN or Zapier or anything like that, it's a lot like that conceptually. But hey, in order to deliver excellent maintenance coordination, what are the series of actions that we have to go through? Okay. The first action conceptually is we have to triage the work. Okay. And part of the triaging of work, we have to determine, is this a duplicate task? Has this happened in the past? Okay. Then after the triage, I have to scope it. Do we have enough information required to make a good decision? Okay. Do we need to get more information from an external party and create what's called a request for information, RFI? You start piecing together these conceptual standard operating procedures. Okay. And the whole thing together is a operating workflow engine. It's a giant standard operating procedure of these different workflows that have to happen in sequence. So once you've identified those operating workflows, you create an engine, just like with the guest message, of what context is required in order to expertly scope, in order to expertly determine if this maintenance item has enough information in order for our team to act on, or whether or not the homeowner needs to be notified in real time. And when you piece all of that together, what you can arrive at is a linear or nonlinear, doesn't matter, series of steps where the AI can do these 4 out of 9 steps, but then a human needs input here, and then these 2 steps can happen by an AI, and then needs input here. You're going to find that the workflow is going to need a human in the loop system. That human in the loop system is needed there because you realize, going back all the way to the nuance, you realize that there is nuance in your business, that your system is not going to be sophisticated enough to fully automate around without creating significant risk or reputational risk. Okay. Accelerating the human has huge impacts to your contribution margin, their ability to operate effectively, etc. The user can accept, modify, reject, or take their own course of action in that system. Your system logs that, just like the guest message, just like any feedback loop. Your system then logs what action the human took versus what the AI suggested. Hopefully, I don't need to tell you, I think that's obvious, that creates the ability for you to learn over time how to improve the artificial intelligence that is becoming the backbone of your company. And if you're not careful, it becomes difficult for the human to go into multiple screens, click on this workflow, answer the question, go to the next task and click up, or Monday or Slack, click there. No, what you want is you want to create an interface where they log in, they press start queue. And that queue says, here's the decision that you're making right now. The scope of we need to scope this task. The reason why we need to scope this task is because this task came into the system yesterday. And we need to determine if we have enough information so it can be acted on quickly. It's an urgent task because it looks like it might be a small leak, blah, 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 blah. Here's all the context and the graphics, blah, blah. This is our recommendation. We have enough information for this to be immediately sent to a vendor. Yes. What's the next most important decision that the employee needs to make? Bring it. And goes back to the human in loop node. The human in loop node has to be completely self-contained. It needs to be all the information required to make that decision so the human can make it, but also so that your system grabs all that context, takes a snapshot of it, right? And logs that against the human's response versus the AI's response. Once you have that queue, then the cool thing is the system teaches itself. The humans, by the nature of doing their work in the queue, are grading the AI, even if they're doing it subconsciously, because their response is always measured against the AI's response. If your AI really sucks, then cool. Don't show the AI response. Just make the queue so it's easier for your employees to do their freaking job. Put the AI response in the background if it sucks right now. But measure what your AI thought should have happened against what they said. What action did they actually take? That's where the power comes from. And that's where you create a system that OODAs. That's the name of our company, OODA, Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. And that to me is the nature of good decision making. What I will say is that if you get through all those steps, your goal should be to then link outcomes to your tasks. So when you provide a value to a customer, let's say we'll go back to guest messaging. When you start saying, hey, here's the entire series of operating workflow engines that decided every single guest message for this particular guest, and the automatic triage of on-site maintenance for this guest who had an issue during their stay. Here's all the workflows associated. You start being able to pair, here's all these workflows that ran that are connected to these digital twin objects, right? The guest, the reservation, the property, etc. And you're able to then pair that data to outcomes of, did we get a 5-star review? Once you start linking the operating workflow engines to, and their instances and runs, like here's all the steps that ran, here's all the context that was available, etc., then what happens is you're able to go back and say, I don't like the result that happened in my business. I don't like the outcome. Let's go back in the time machine and say, give us a full timeline. But you're not just saying what's the full timeline of the messages. Well, you can open up the app and see the timeline. But how was every decision made and who made what decisions? And that is where the learning loop of how to improve an organization very rapidly without having to retrain employees and just changing code. That's how you can accelerate and, in my opinion, take over an industry if you have the right people on your staff and you've got the right infrastructure. So, it's going to be hard, but very, very possible. So I hope this helped you. I hoped that this might have inspired you to create an AI native service company or to maybe change things in your own company. And if you have ideas or things that I miss, feel free to reach out to me. I'm a big believer in perpetual and endless learning. So happy to collaborate and talk to you.